Welcome to the Retail Summit. My name is Joel Goldstein, and I'm happy to be joined with Suthar. He's really an expert on employee happiness and the founder of Squirrel, which is a simple way to train your emotional, physical, and financial well-being. But we'll be diving into all that. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
So the big topic I really want to discuss with you is one that we're seeing with this cross-generational change, which is how do we keep our employees happy? Because overall, there's doom and gloom in the world, and there's a lot more out there that people are worried about than just what's going on in the workforce. So if you can give a couple tips on what employers should focus on when creating a well-being or an environment of happiness, what would you say to focus on?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've got 5 generations represented in the workforce now, so it's more diverse than ever. We can make broad sweeping assumptions about baby boomers and Gen X and Gen Z and all that. But really what goes to the core of this is everyone first wants to be seen and recognized for where they're at and feel okay about wherever they may be, right? Building that kind of comfort for a person to bring themselves whole and complete to the workplace is really the first barrier that you have to cross and build into your environment. The second one is to then have really meaningful conversations about where your employees want to go and how they define happiness for themselves, and see what kind of narrative or experience that's meaningful that you can bring within the workplace to help realize that.
Okay. So it seems a little kumbaya, it seems a little overly nurturing. Is that what a manager and what a small business owner has to do now to create a sustainable workforce?
I don't think it's about that, right? I think I see it very differently. I think it's about building recognition and accountability, because really they're two sides of the same coin. When I work transparently and I can show who I am, I can have meaningful conversations about what I'm doing well, and then maybe build enough trust to have tougher conversations about where I need to grow and what the company needs or the role is requiring, right? And I think it may seem from afar that this is like, oh my goodness, this is more onus on the employer to bring, but really what we're doing is we're going many surfaces deeper than working that 9 to 5. And if you expect your employee to show up and put in, act more than an employee, but really take some accountability and go the extra mile, then they need to bring a sense of ownership, and you need to help nurture and build that as well.
Do you think that's what a lot of these small businesses are encountering when they have such high employee turnover from the younger generations, where they just stop showing up, they don't call in? We've heard a lot of stories like that where they have to hire 5 people to see one show up on the day of when they start. So how can a small business owner kind of stem that tide? How can we be attractive to a younger demographic that's coming into the workforce?
Sure. I mean, the younger demographics values are very, very different, right? You're seeing more of a values-based mindset rather than goals-based mindset. By that, what I mean is like a goals-based mindset might have been, hey, I want to make X amount of money so I can have, whatever kind of lifestyle that I want to have, right? Now they're just going directly to the lifestyle, where they're like, I want this kind of lifestyle, and does this job fit into that kind of lifestyle, or my values of how I want to live and how I want to travel and all these things, right? So it's kind of the model's flipped a little bit, and I don't know if we can. I think about Mark Twain's quote about it's easier to fool someone than to convince them they've been fooled. I think with mentoring and with recognizing and leadership comes a lot more patience. Whenever you typically see someone leave like a corporate job in the city and go to more of a small business environment, the attraction is really I get to own my schedule. I get to get a higher level of ownership. I get to practice a broader sense of skills than just being pigeonholed to one role, right? So it's really about amplifying all those things and finding a meaningful connection with that candidate, and with your company right in that interviewing process itself.
So if I'm a small business, would you recommend that I take on a value or something that my small business supports, whether that be at the local food pantry or the animal shelter, something like that, where we can create a giving mentality to kind of rally the troops, so to say? Will that make me more attractive to a younger workforce that might share those values? How can I, as an employer, give them what they want so that they give me what I want? How can we set that up?
Well, let's jump into an example, right? Like, let's say you look at the coffee shop, right? It's really hard for me to tie that to some like world level kind of influence or anything like that, right? But you do get to influence your community in an everyday role. You probably see the same number of customers. You get to know them, build some rapport. You might be able to build some level of autonomy and trust over time, where they can extend services or gratitude or something like that to long-standing customers to make them be seen or valued. And that definitely becomes part of your culture, like what you're known for within the community, in that kind of example, right? And then within specifically with that hiring that role and that candidate, what you want to see in your interviewing process is, does this person have the capacity to do these things? Can they provide me examples of going above and beyond and using their mind to really apply themselves, but also understanding the bounds of the role and exactly where those boundaries are, and having an agreement upon that.
One thing that I'm hearing a lot from small businesses is that the entitled millennial mindset is something that they can't abide, because they had to work so hard and they had to do all these things, and people are expecting $15 an hour and stipends for this, and they want their gym membership paid for, and they expect all of these things off the bat from a waitressing job, so to say. How can a small business prevent millennials and Gen X, or whatever's coming next, Gen Z? How can they prevent them from just quitting all the time? Because the onboarding is so time intensive for these small businesses. From the ones that I've spoken to, they're spending a lot of their time just trying to find people that'll stick around and press a key. I don't blame them for looking for automated solutions. And I mean, as the presidential elections come near, Andrew Yang's pushing for the freedom dividend to give everybody money, because it's inevitable that a lot of these smaller jobs are going to be outsourced to machines that don't complain. How can we stem the tides of war? How can we stave that off? Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there. So here's my understanding of this. I think we're having kind of through the technology revolution, we're kind of going through amidst like our own version of the industrial revolution, where your mental ability and your creativity will be valued more than your physical labor, right? And if you think about the manufacturing line, I don't think any human was ever like made to work 75 years on a manufacturing line. That is atrocious by like today's standards. But I know it's a way of living for quite a few people, unfortunately. And I hope like through technology, we can genuinely move past that, when we can have more fulfilling lives using our minds and working on a greater plane. But until we get there, I think specifically for small businesses, there are a lot of tax incentives that I see go heavily underutilized. This is why we're kind of working in the wellness space is, for example, up to $5,120 some per year is what you can spend on student loan repayment. And that is 100% tax deduction, right? that is money on the table, or the value that you can provide to your employee to stick around, not necessarily have that go directly to salaried monies, and take advantage of tax incentives and some government programs on a state and federal level. The other one is also wellness programs, gym memberships. They're solely working on an honor code, right? You don't know how much they're really using it, how much it's meaningful or not, but it's really well intended by employers. So that's another thing that we've been working on building, is how do we build a platform where there's some data for the employer to understand, hey, what's being used, what's working, what's not, how do I invest in my people in a more strategic way, without like giving away like everything to your health insurance companies who are just increasing deductibles on you and your employees. And it's almost kind of harbored some ill will between employees and employers, where they think like, oh, my employer doesn't care about me and my well-being. No, it's like, they don't know what it's like. It's what it's like to be a small business owner, where you're balancing the checkbook, you're trying to make ends meet, you're trying to keep the company profitable, and you want to keep your employees happy. But like, who's looking after your well-being as the owner, right? That's a really big gap, because our current products out there in the health insurance world, in the healthcare world, don't really account for this, and it's a big problem. And that's one we're most passionate about tackling.
I can see that. I mean, the costs have been skyrocketing for a while. Where do you think owners should invest in their employees, and what aspects of their lives does it make the biggest impact?
That's a really good question. Physical, emotional, and financial well-being are the top three places. So emotional meaning stress
Take
levels.
us through each one of those if you can.
Sure. So let's start with stress, right? The newer generations of workers, for whatever reasons we want to assume, report greater levels of stress than all previous four generations represented in the workforce. My hypothesis is they need to understand frameworks and tools for themselves to better understand their own well-being and how to handle stress. So for example, gratitude journaling has been a known tool to help PTSD patients manage their levels of stress, right? You could deploy something like that on a personal level, or introduce them to tools like that to help them manage and understand what's happening. Then financial well-being, right? 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 in savings, and 40% can't afford a $400 emergency expense without using credit. And this isn't necessarily saying we're not earning enough. I think the idea of savings and disposable income have been eroded by extreme costs in retail, education, and healthcare, right? You see more bankruptcies happening because of not being able to pay medical bills than any other reason. Now, here's the funny thing though. Most people don't know that if you had an HSA account with a high deductible plan, you can actually invest that HSA, the monies in the HSA account, like into an ETF or an IRA, so it can grow aggressively. So some of it is what you want to use over the course of the year, and the rest of it is what you want to save for retirement to cover these medical expenses. And all of this on both ends has multiple tax deductions, right? So these tools are not being utilized and understood to the extent they can be. And part of it is because we have this employer tethered platform. It makes it hard for the employers. It makes it hard for employees. And guess what? It's even unprofitable for the banks to operate these products, because when you leave an employer, that's that HSA account that I forgot about, right? And then it's gone orphaned. So a lot of these things, we just need better constructs around them to help reinforce. And then physical, which is if you're an office worker in a sedentary environment behind a computer, you need to get up and get moving around, because guess what? Even 2,000 steps that you add to your daily habit per day is an 8% reduction in the risk of chronic cardiovascular diseases. The CDC measured that if every American walked 10,000 steps a day, we'd save $550 billion every year just treating chronic cardiovascular disease. That's a lot of money on, So we're kind of chronic disease treatment industry. It's not a care industry. And so it may sound counterintuitive, but proactive measures may actually help benefit not just your culture, but your bottom line much more than treating these chronic conditions.
Doing things like having a walking program in your gratitude journal, things like that, the little things will help de-stress the workers, you're saying, and that'll lead to more employee retention and better results and happiness in the work environment. Is the 40-hour work week still a relevant concept in today's world?
That's a great point. There's always like these two buckets of employees that you see, right? You see the 9 to 5 clockers, and then you see the ones that find real meaning in the work and will put in the extra effort an hour, but then they also want more responsibility. I think it's really got to be up to people. I think providing flexible understanding of building it, rather than building it around hours, it's building it around responsibilities, right? Like I need you to be there for the customers when they need you, right? Figure out how you can make that possible and have a work-life balance. And I understand you have kids or those kind of schedules, but then like let's just be responsible and hold ourselves accountable. But you need systems to account for that too. So that doesn't mean you get rid of timesheets and things like that altogether. It just means that you have to build new models.
You mentioned work-life balance. How can I, as a employer, support a work-life balance with my employees having kids that need to go to the doctor, and they need to run the kids to the doctor, but I need somebody there answering the phones because I don't want to be the business that doesn't answer the phone when it rings. How can I account for that and support that kind of a environment in my office?
Absolutely. There's something called the jobs to be done framework, which what it does is it's a framework that says it goes after what your outcome is that you want rather than like the way you're doing something. So for example, with that example of like answering the phones, right? What you're really saying is the way your customers prefer to reach out to you is via phone, and you need someone to be there for your customers. Now, if you could deploy that to be a mobile solution, it doesn't matter where your employee is. As long as they're answering that phone call and meeting the customer's needs, and you can see some accountability or action of that, you've got your solution. You've got what you still want, right? So we've got to look for those technologies. We've got to build those new solutions that allow us to do these things and still maintain some semblance of work-life balance.
On a solution for that, I know we spoke a little bit about Squirrel earlier, but you're working on a platform for that. Can you tell me how you've seen implementing this kind of a platform into a small business has increased employee happiness and that's benefited the small business itself?
Absolutely. So we have 3 different examples I can pull. One was a remote team where they kind of, they're really a lean operation. They don't have the costs of like a retail shop or anything like that, but they have a complete lack of culture. So like the steps challenge becomes a weekly steps challenge becomes a democratizing thing, because whether you're the boss or the employee, you see everyone has kind of the same struggles with a challenge like that. Like, how do I get my steps in? Do I do a walking meeting? Like, people get creative and really once they buy in, make it part of their culture, because it becomes a common point for everyone to talk to. In a physical environment like a warehouse, this is where it gets particularly interesting. Is we typically say we have these mental models in our mind that construction worker is overweight or a warehouse worker is unhealthy. But you know what? They don't get the credit that they deserve for how active they already are throughout the day, right? And so just when you start like any habit formation, cue, action, reward, right? If you tap into what people are already doing and then show them what their action, the reward that action is leading to, you can start nudging them towards a new habit cycle that gradually builds over time. So now imagine all of the users that over the course of the year that have used Squirrel, even if they're walking 3,000 steps a day, which is the national average, as little as that, they still manage to save $1,000 for themselves using Squirrel. And that's $1,000 they didn't know that it was possible to save, and that gives them the kind of relief mentally, stress-wise, and confidence within themselves to actually get deeper into planning or find other well-being tools to kind of make their journey their own. We're kind of the entry point, but like we're not trying to define everything, because well-being can mean a lot of different things to different folks.
That's an excellent point. I think a lot of people kind of focus on how to grow the business, how to increase sales, how to do everything. But at the end of the day, it's a people business, and your employees are not going to give excellent customer service, and your salespeople aren't going to go out there and fight for you if they're not satisfied in the workspace. So thank you so much for lending your expertise on how to increase employee happiness. I think it was really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll leave you with is we have a bias towards action. So, it's kind of like tacit learning, right? I could give you a set of instructions on how to swim. Doesn't mean you know how to swim now, right? Same way, I see a lot of these wellness programs out there. They do a lot of PowerPoints and high touch point experiences, but they don't permeate every part of your life. And they actually eat away the hours that your workers are available to do their jobs. That's where we're different. We have a digital app, so it's always with you in your phone. It's a sponsored experience, so you get credit for it, right? And then you're investing in your workforce while on top of the savings that they're already incurring for themselves. And it's early, but we're working on a survey that is going to tell us how much employee satisfaction increases by just the amount of money that they've learned to save. So, the level of happiness with their current level of pay, we believe will go up as the person's ability to save increases.
I think it's really kind of a win-win solution that you created there. And we'll be linking your website below, so that if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can. But thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And this was great.